It's been almost 1 year since a white supremacist rally turned deadly in Charlottesville, Virginia. Organizers were upset over plans to remove statues of Confederate generals Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson from a local park. Today, more than 750 Confederate monuments dot the landscape of America, mostly in the South. Richmond, Virginia is the former capital of the Confederacy, and it's wrestling with how to reconcile that past, specifically what to do with statues lining Monument Avenue. A commission is expected to release its recommendations soon. The co-chair of that commission also happens to run the Civil War Museum in Richmond, and she's African-American. Our correspondent, Jessica Gomez, sat down with Christy Coleman, who says the issue is not just black and white.
Unlocking the stories of the past. It's a passion for Christy Coleman, CEO of the American Civil War Museum in Richmond, Virginia. Deep inside the museum's vault, pieces of history. Here, mostly Confederate history.
They're used to it now, but when I first got here, that was, I think, one of the headlines. African-American woman takes over Civil War Museum. I said, okay, here we go. Here we go.
Just a few years into the job, there were more headlines after a proposal to merge the museum with the nearby Museum of the Confederacy.
Let's head into the state dining room.
The museum, which included the White House of the Confederacy, had a fiercely loyal following, but was struggling financially. Former investment banker and Civil War history buff Waite Rawls was at the helm.
If you try to raise money for the history of the Confederacy, you're barking up the wrong alley. It's not going to work. You have to get the Confederacy into the full context of the period.
Rawls liked the idea of the merger and liked Christy.
She's female, I'm not. I've got all these ancestors who fought in the Civil War. She doesn't. She's African American, I'm not. Put the two of us together, and now you've got these multiple perspectives that bring the history to life for people without saying, you're right, you're wrong.
The museums were merged. Construction is now underway to house the artifacts from both museums in a 28,000 square foot space. When completed next year, it'll be the second largest Civil War museum in the country after Gettysburg.
We wanted to elicit a response. We wanted people to see something that would strike them to their core.
But there was a price for progress. Nearly half of the Confederacy Museum's members went away. Not before the angry calls and letters.
I have no wish to fully explore the so-called colored, Negro, Black, or African American experience. I do not approve of Christy Coleman. So that's where we are.
But the mayor of Richmond does approve of Coleman, appointing her co-chair of the commission, tasked with deciding what to do with the city's Confederate monuments. Robert E. Lee, Jeb Stuart, Jefferson Davis, and others. In the former capital of the Confederacy, passions over the past flaring up once again.
They're taking my statues down, but y'all let them keep putting their statues up.
If these statues are heritage, then your heritage is hate.
What we find is less than 20% want them completely removed. Less than 20% want them to stay exactly as they are. The majority have some really interesting dynamics along the way.
Proposals include adding context, descriptions near the monuments, or perhaps even erecting additional statues.
I think what's happening is healthy for this community. Frankly, when I look at the statues, they don't have the same power for me. I understand them and the environment in which these things were built. But for people who have a truly visceral, emotional reaction to all of this, you can't discount that either.
Whatever happens next, Coleman says, will determine the next chapter in Richmond's rich history.
If we can't understand this American crisis and trauma and how it all came together, we cannot be what we were intended to be. That's why it's important. That's why I still do what I do.
In Richmond, Virginia, for Matter of Fact, I'm Jessica Gomez.
It's unclear if the city has the authority to remove the Richmond statues because state law makes it illegal to remove war memorials. A separate lawsuit filed in Charlottesville has temporarily put a stop to that city's effort to remove the Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson statues.